Iran has got these proxies operating in Iraq and Syria, and the United States took action militarily to take them out because they were staging grounds to attack U.S. troops. At the same time, word got out through NBC News, ready for this, that the president is considering lifting sanctions against the Ayatollah. You mean the Ayatollah that orders these proxy groups to attack U.S. troops? We're going to take sanctions off of him? We're rewarding him for killing American troops?
It's insane. Why would you do this? You're the leader of the free world. You're the commander-in-chief of the United States of America. We do not need to have this agreement with Iran. We certainly don't need an agreement that will allow them to eventually get a nuclear weapon, and meanwhile they're attacking U.S. troops.
They're sitting on the Ringstrasse in Vienna right now, having their little coffee and their croissant, and they're talking on the seventh series of negotiations, and meanwhile we're bombing them on the Iraqi-Syria border. Kataib Hezbollah and Kataib Sayyid al-Shahada are being bombed, which are the proxies of the Iranians. What are we getting out of coming back into the JCPOA? Tell me one concrete thing that the Iranians are conceding to us. I'd like to know.
They don't know what they're doing. You cannot be talking and negotiating with the Iranian regime to drop sanctions and at the same time take to the air to bomb their activities. This is ludicrous. Regular people can see that this is inconsistent, and yet inherent in that whole idea of the Iranian regime negotiations is an assumption that you trust the Iranians and what they're saying. You cannot trust the Iranians in negotiations while looking to see that they're spreading terrorism, so much so that the Americans have to go in and bomb in Iraq and Syria the Iran-backed terrorists.
This is from CNN. Listen to Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, CNN military analyst. Here's what he says about it.
These Iranian-backed Shia militias have been operating with impunity in the area near the Syria-Iraq border. The strikes were 2 in Syria, 1 in Iraq, at facilities used by Kataib Hezbollah, KH, and Kataib Sayyid al-Sahuda. These are 2 Iranian-backed militias that frankly have been operating independently, and by reports, they have conducted 5 drone strikes against U.S. forces in that area. So it is a defensive action protecting U.S. forces in that part of Iraq, Syria.
When you got attacks being launched by proxies of Iran against U.S. troops, you take action. You did. Well, let me tell you what you don't do. You don't on the same hand say, and by the way, Ayatollah, we're going to lift sanctions against you. That mixed messaging in diplomatic circles, and we'll end on this, Rick, we just got less than a minute here. That kind of mixed messaging in diplomatic circles, and I've done diplomatic negotiations, multilateral, trilateral, country negotiation, it doesn't work. You've done it. You're an ambassador. It does not work when you mix message like this.
And not only doesn't work, but the Europeans know that we look silly and inconsistent,
right.
And they're just laughing all the way to the bank, because if Europe raises some sort of concern about a U.S. policy, Biden rushes to change the policy, because he maximizes getting along with the Europeans more than he does a Western-facing alliance.
When the United States pulled out of the JCPOA, this Iran nuclear deal, the Europeans were still in it. The Europeans have confirmed that Iran has not fulfilled its obligations, in fact, continued to develop centrifuges and other weapons leading towards a nuclear weapon, other capabilities leading towards a nuclear weapon. So why in the world would you trust these people going back into a deal when they're more intent now, Andy, than ever, and using their proxies to actually attack U.S. forces?
Well, you wouldn't trust them. And look, the European view should not be and ought not to be the American view.
Every indication from multiple media outlets and from people who have knowledge of these negotiations in Vienna is that the Biden administration is prepared to really give Iran pretty much what they want in exchange for nothing. The original JCPOA was flawed. It did not keep Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. It simply delayed it for a number of years. Because Iran has enriched uranium now to 60% levels and have increased their centrifuges, nuclear experts say they're down to 3 or 4 months breakout time to having a nuclear weapon. And yet, in spite of all of these stark facts, these realities, the Biden administration is intent
Yeah.
on going through with it anyway.
This is not the way to conduct diplomacy, Andy. We have done that. We have conducted trilateral negotiations, multi-country negotiations. It's mixed messaging at best and mixed signals at worst.